In the previous episode, I took my viewers to the old town of Sungkai, where the Japanese 5th Division had amassed before crossing the Sungkai Bridge on January 6, 1942, to continue their attacking thrust to Kuala Lumpur. This episode will continue to give an overview of the overall strategies adopted by the British 11th Indian Division, especially concerning troops' disposition at Sungkai and Trolak sector. The second marker site is an area occupied by the unit of the 4th 19th Hyderabad, a subset battalion of the 12th Indian Brigade, now led by the newly promoted Lieutenant Colonel Ian McAllister Stewart, who was acting brigadier. The conditions of the 4th 19th Hyderabad men before the battle were a bit depressing. Fatigue and low morale were rife due to the non-stop retreat activities from the Kampa position just a few days before. This unit has suffered almost 25% casualties rate since the outbreak of the war, along with the other two battalions of the 12th Indian Brigade. This brigade was the only brigade within the Malaya Command formation to undergo intensive jungle training in November 1941 under the personal initiative of Lieutenant Colonel Ian McAllister Stewart, though Lieutenant General Arthur E. Percival labelled him a crank for taking his job seriously. Although the men were the fittest, the retreat from the north had taken a toll on their fighting ability. Furthermore, the same men had been battling a dire flanking attack from the west by the unit of the Japanese 11th Regiment, advancing by the road from Hutan Melintang and Teluk Anson, moving to Bido, in their objective to cut off the British Army from the south. They were successfully stopped temporarily at the Air Kuning Bridge in Cangkat Jong by the men of the 12th Indian Brigade, just before the whole British 11th Indian Division barely managed to be pulled out from Tapah and Bido area. The Japanese were actively bombing these men, which resulted in their CO wounded. The non-stop harassment by the enemy put the whole of the 12th Indian Brigade men in an exertion physical state after 3 weeks non-stop of rearguard action, including carrying out retreating missions from the north. Nevertheless, the success of shredding an enemy probing party down the railway line on the evening of the 5th of January 1942 put the men of A Company of the 4th 19th Hyderabad unit at least in a cheering mood, albeit wariness. After the first successful engagement with the enemy, there was a lull period that gave the Hyderabad men an opportunity to get a much-needed sleep while continuing to be cautious of the whole situation. They are now the outpost unit for the Battle of Slim River. This battalion is now being led by Major Alan Davidson Brown, who was the second in command, after their commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Eric Wilson Huffenden, had been wounded by the enemy aerial bombing during the hasty retreat from Cangkat Jong hours before they took up the current position at marker site number 2. For the record, the 4th 19th Hyderabad Battalion had been involved in 4 major battles from the east coast to the west of Malaya since the start of the war. They were also responsible for covering the Kampa position during the rearguard actions from Gopeng to the north of Dipang Bridge. I blame this stupidity on Lieutenant General Percival himself, who seems insensitive and ignorant of human physical limitations. The 12th Indian Brigade was supposed to be a reserve brigade that was originally being put under his direct command, and not as the forward brigade under the 11th Indian Division. I am now standing at milestone 60, which was the defensive positions for the 4th 19th Hyderabad unit from the 4th of January to the 7th of January 1942. So the area behind me in the military map of 1942 was marked as the milestone 60, which marked the defensive positions for the 4th 19th Hyderabad men. So astride this road, if you can see on my left side was the old road, the 1939, and there was an old road prior to 1939, which I will show all of you later. So this side of the road on my left side was the 1939 road, and on my right side is the road that had been extended or that had been widened post-independence period to cater the need of the Malayan people in the modern time. So behind me was the locations where the 4th 19 Hyderabad had been positioned from the 4th of January to fateful early morning of 7th of January 1942. So after the Battle of Kampar, Lieutenant General Arthur E. Percival agreed with the request made by Lieutenant General Heath to retreat further back from the Kampar area due to the threat arising from the Teluk Ensign and Bido Road. The 15th Indian Brigade took up the position at the Sungkai sector to provide a cover force for the 12th Indian Brigade men to prepare the defensive positions right up from the milestone 60 to the milestone 65 of I will bring all of you later. So this position first occupied by the 4th 19 Hyderabad men. This unit or this battalion was a subset of the 12th Indian Brigade. Due to 3 weeks non-stop retreat and there were battles along the way, they had been reduced to 25% strength of the original strength at the outset of the war. So the 4th 19 Hyderabad strike this road. The CO of the 4th 19 Hyderabad, which at that time was Major Alan Davidson Brown, who was acting CO, when their CO, Lieutenant Colonel Eric Wilson Huffenden, had been wounded due to the non-stop bombing from the air, he decided to put up C Company astride of this road in front of me. And the A Company will put astride at the railway line, which at around 200 or 300 meters from where we are standing. So this road ran parallel with the railway line, heading towards the Old Trolak town and also the Stream River. So this area had been attacked as early as 3:30 a.m. in the morning. And in the Japanese map again, they managed to locate the old loop road for the possibility for the tank to use, which were just right a few meters from where I am standing. I will show all of you later. But the positions of the C Company were further south, and they put up roadblocks, which consists of the cylinder block and also denet wire, and covered with an anti-tank weapon, one anti-tank weapon. They do not put any anti-tank mines, even though Division HQ hold up to 2,400 anti-tank mines at that time. All were brought further back to Tanjung Malim. The first battalion unit that were provided with anti-tank mines were the 5th to Punjab, located at 1 mile south from the 4th 19 Hyderabad position. So this area were attacked early morning on the 7th of January 1942 at 3:30 a.m. using a tank as a frontal assault unit. And the Japanese engineer managed to clear the cylinder roadblock with the denet wire, and they proved further south, which was the 5th to Punjab locations or defensive area that was relatively stronger than the 4th 19 Hyderabad unit. If there was a brigade in the Malaya Command or BAT to punish or stem the swift advance of the 25th Imperial Japanese Army from conquering the whole of Malaya, then the 12th Indian Brigade was up for the task. They were the fittest unit compared to the other brigade under the Malaya Command formations. But the non-stop fighting for the previous 3 weeks had taken a large toll on the men of the 12th Indian Brigade, with 25% casualties suffered overall to the original numbers of men. The exploits of the 12th Indian Brigade men can be traced back to the Battle of Titi Karangan and the Battle of the Greek Road since the start of the war. The men or the commanding officer of the 3 battalions had proven their worth during the rearguard action. They managed to severely punish the enemy along the Metal Road access while retreating down south. For example, Lieutenant Colonel Ian McAllister Stewart, commanding officer of the 2nd Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders, had successfully led his men to repulse many Japanese outflanking attacks at the Battle of the Greek Road and the Battle of Titi Karangan, killing a large number of the enemy personnel in the process. The exploits of the 2nd Argyles during the Battle of the Greek Road resulted in their brigade commander being promoted to lead the 11th Indian Division after the loss of Northern Malaya by the previous GOC. Lieutenant Colonel Cecil Dickin, the commanding officer of the 5th to Punjab, also proved himself to be an inspirational leader when he led a counter-attack charge of his Punjab men at the Batu Pekaka Bridge on the 16th of December 1941 near the Kuala Ketil area. The men of the 12th Indian Brigade were capable and their leadership ability was proven, but the non-stop action had greatly affected their overall fitness level. The 3 battalions within the 12th Indian Brigade suffered 25% casualties of their original strength, including their efficiency as fighting men. They were dead tired, lacked sleep, and were deprived of necessities such as toothbrushes, clean showers, and clean outfits. They continued to be harassed from the air by the Japanese Army Air Force, which now had full supremacy over the Malayan airspace. But the new acting GOC for the 12th Indian Brigade was in high spirits and confidence. He wants to show he's capable of leading the 11th Indian Division yet again after the success at Kampar. Brigadier Paris planned to further punish the Japanese 25th Imperial Army in the Trolak sector. Lieutenant Colonel Ian Stewart came up with a very good plan to achieve Brigadier Paris' vision. He set up a trap for the Japanese infantry by positioning his 3 battalions to fit the grand plan, which relied heavily on the metal road, because in this tactic, the success of it would highly leverage on the mobility of his men, which depended heavily on the road access. On 31st of December 1941, when Lieutenant General Percival and Lieutenant General Heath visited the Slim River and Trolak sectors, they found Lieutenant Colonel Ian McAllister Stewart was reconnoitering the Trolak area to spring the aforementioned trap. Percival, however, gave Paris and Stewart only 2 days to hold the Trolak and Slim River sectors before they must retreat south to Tanjung Malim for a longer holdout. Stewart positioned the men of the 4th 19th Hyderabad Battalion as the frontier unit to bait and lure the enemy to press the attack further deep along the metal road and railway line. Stewart's directive to the Hyderabadis was not to commit, but to retreat south immediately after the contact was established. This should give a clear killing zone for the unit of the 350th Field Regiment Royal Artillery to start shooting at the now abandoned Hyderabadis area at milestone 60. The Hyderabadis should leapfrog behind the 2nd Argyle position at least 2 miles down the road to give an in-depth defense to the 12th Indian Brigade, which were positioned along the metal road between milestone 60 to milestone 64. The 5th to Punjab would hold the position behind the Hyderabadis, supported with 2 anti-tank guns and 2 roadblocks at a 1-mile depth from milestone 61 to milestone 62 at the start of the 2nd Argyle position. The Punjab position was relatively stronger than the Hyderabadis, with cuttings of the metal road along the defilement that should provide an elevated position for the Punjab riflemen to shoot an incoming enemy tanks down the road starting at milestone 61. Brigadier Paris and Lieutenant Colonel Stewart reckoned if the Japanese infantry started to infiltrate deep in the jungle as the usual outflanking movement trying to surround the 5th to Punjab men, the 2nd Argyles, which were positioned in depth to the west of the railway line and to the east of the metal road, would sandwich the Japanese infantry to annihilation and come to the rescue of the surrounded Punjab men in the process before both battalions would retreat south of the Trolak Bridge at milestone 64 using the motor transport vehicles. Once the mission to annihilate the Japanese infantry was completed, the men of the 12th Indian Brigade would retreat south behind the Trolak Bridge, which is now being prepared for demolition. Once the whole 12th Indian Brigade moved south of this Trolak Bridge, the Royal Engineers men should destroy it to prevent the pursuing enemy from using it and delay the enemy's movement to Slim River. And the whole brigade should continue to move behind the check position at milestone 65, which by that time was supposed to be held by the unit of the 5th 14th Punjab Battalion. A unit at that juncture should be transferred from the 28th Indian Brigade to the 12th Indian Brigade under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Ian McAllister Stewart. At first glance, this plan seems foolproof and solid. But Brigadier Paris and Lieutenant Colonel Stewart, in their sheer excitement and optimism to set up such a trap, forgot to take into consideration one vital fact, which was, after 3 weeks of non-stop retreat, the 11th Indian Division had lost much of its wireless and landline equipment, which such an ambitious plan laid out at Trolak would certainly need. Meanwhile, the 12th Indian Brigade at this juncture doesn't have any of their wireless equipment at their disposal. This would only be asking for trouble. Lieutenant Colonel Stewart at his brigade HQ relies only on the most basic modes of communication between his 3 battalions, and also to communicate with Lieutenant Colonel William Ray Selby, the acting brigadier for the 28th Indian Brigade, whose brigade now has been explicitly instructed by Brigadier Paris to rest and refit at Kampung Slim. The 2 modes of communication now were the telegraph line along the railroad and the dispatch rider riding on 250cc motorcycle that must use the metal road to relay messages to the 3 units along the metal road at milestone 60 to milestone 64, or even to the 28th Indian Brigade HQ at Harbour Status in Kampung Slim. Plus, with the non-stop aerial harassment during daytime by the Japanese Army Air Force, the men of the 12th Indian Brigade could only use the route at night time and were deprived of their much-needed sleep, which now went against the psychological clock of the already embattled men of the 12th Indian Brigade. The threat of the area bombing was also the reason why Lieutenant Colonel Ian Stewart chose his brigade HQ position deep in the rubber plantation at Kelapa Bali Estate to the west of the railroad, which should be able to give concealment from the freely roaming Japanese planes. If Lieutenant Colonel Stewart lost control of the metal road, which was the backbone of his grand master plan, he would be in a pretty bad pickle. So actually the state of Perak were very luscious in terms of its forest and jungle condition, and as such they have a lot of creeks, rivers, and hilly mountain areas. So when the British colonial government decided to build a metal road for land transportation connecting districts that produce a lot of tin commodities, they had to navigate along the difficult terrain, which makes the metal road conditions were very challenging and crooked. So because of the tin prosperity and richness that the community brought to the state of Perak, the British colonial government managed to build a better infrastructure and decided to improve on the metal road conditions since the use of motor transport had become very popular and efficient compared to the railway transportations. So post 1939, they managed to straighten out a number and a lot of a crooked metal road sector for the benefits of the Malayan people to transport tins to the main cities before they eventually were brought to Pulau Pinang for smelting and export. So one of the old loop road that exists, which directly involved in the Battle of Slim River, is where I am standing right now. Just in front of the milestone 60 marker, I'm quite possibly certain that this old loop road were used by the 6th Tank Regiment alongside of the old loop road at milestone 58 and 59, which I have brought all of you. And the existence of this a number of loop roads from milestone 60, from where I am standing now, to the dispositions area of the Argyle at milestone 64, proved very useful for the invading Japanese army on that fateful morning of 7th of January 1942. The 4th 19 Hyderabad men, when they put up the cylinder roadblock just in front of me, from of the area where I've shown all of you, There were a number of roadblocks that also had been put up by the Sisters Battalion, especially the 5th 2 Punjab unit, which at around 1.5 miles from where I am standing now, and also the Argal position. So the Scottish unit, the 2nd Argal and Sutherland Highlanders put up 2 roadblocks. One roadblocks that had been prepared prior to the Battle of Slim River, and another one that was hastily being prepared once the 5th 2 Punjab position had been breached by the Japanese unit. And I will bring all of you to all of those areas later. The 4th 19th Hyderabad men were given 3 days to prepare their defensive position at milestone 60. Still, the irony was that this fixed defensive area must be abandoned quickly once the Japanese infantry unit attacked this area. The Hyderabadis had to comply with the initial plan drafted by Brigadier Paris and Lieutenant Colonel Ian Stewart. On paper, the plan laid out by Brigadier Paris and Lieutenant Colonel Stewart was foolproof, but on the execution part, there were too many factors that would risk its success. One of it was that this area around me in 1942 were thick jungle conditions, and you could say there were even tigers then roaming in this area. Needless to say, keeping a strong linear line of defense would be impossible for the Hyderabadis, especially to keep communication open between the A Company position astride the railway line and the men of C Company astride the metal road, since they were being separated by the thick jungle. Another important point which I want to note, in the early month of January, Peninsula Malaya was still in the monsoon month period, where wet and non-stop rainy condition would affect the ideal situation for a soldiers to function. Moreover, the 12th Indian Brigade men continued to be harassed from the air by daytime, while they had to be vigilant during night time. Their mobility was limited to nighttime only, since their daylight activities, which were to replenish their supplies with the back echelons, would risk their convoy from being bombed and strafed by the Japanese planes roaming over the Malayan airspace with impunity. This situation depleted the energy and focus of the Hyderabadis men further. The men of A Company, which were positioned astride the railway line in parallel with the men of the C Company, could only move front and back along the railway line due to the thick jungle condition. Major Alan Davidson Brown, the officiating CO for the Hyderabadis, chose to be attached with the men of A Company, which explained why he was in direct contact by the telegraph line with Brigadier Paris, located 35 km down south at Tanjung Malim by this railway line. Once the marker site area number 2 was hit on the early morning of 7th of January 1942, Brigadier Paris commanded Major Alan Davidson Brown not to commit to the fight, but to pull his Hyderabadis men south of the Punjab defensive position, which was part of his initial plan. The men of A Company managed to break clean from this area down to the 2nd Argal position by this railroad, but the C Company defensive area was overrun too fast by the enemy, which resulted in the men having to commit to fighting, since they could not be dislodged from their position at the metal road area, which now had been surrounded by the Japanese infantrymen, inadvertently hampered the initial plan to be executed. This resulted in the first fiasco of the Trolak sector. So I am now standing at the locations, or at an approximate locations of where the A Company of the 4th 19th Hyderabad men that was positioned from the 4th of January to the 7th of January 1942. So the railway line in front of me on the right side was the old original railway line that had been built since the end of the 19th century by the British colonial government. and an extended line, an additional line on in front of me on my left side was added up by the Malaysian government in 2008 to support the modern need of the railway transportation line with the double railway electrified, which you can see right now. And on the 4th of January 1942, the men of A Company dig up these positions as the tripwire unit. If the Japanese army decided to attack these positions, and they have to swiftly retreat further back to the south. And the attack occurred over here, that was recorded by the military historian, was on the evening of 5th of January 1942, where the men of A Company ambushed a Japanese advance team consists of 2 companies, and in the process they managed to annihilate or decimate at around 156 enemy personnel at around these positions. And the survivors decided to retreat further north to the area where lies the double bridges, the railway bridge and also the metal road bridge, and awaits for the Japanese army engineers to repair and fix those bridges to allow for the Japanese 6th Tank Regiment unit to make the frontal tank charge on the fateful early morning of 7th of January 1942. So this area was very historic. The men of A Company did not suffer any casualty on the evening of 5th of January. But the early morning of 7th of January at 3:30 a.m., once their unit had been hit, Major Alan Davidson Brown, who was the officiating CO at the time, decided to pull the men of A Company back to the southern positions, which were held by the Punjab unit at around 1 mile distance from where I am standing now. So the men of C Company were instructed, once the enemy managed to penetrate and hit that area, they have to retreat deep in the jungle where lies the men of B Company. And theoretically, after they took up all their motor transport vehicle and everything, they have to retreat further back to D Company Battalion, D Company unit of the Battalion HQ, and leapfrog back behind the 52 Punjab unit. But then, in the battle situations or during the fog of war, things are not certain when these positions were hit, and also the metal road were hit, and the Japanese managed to penetrate the C Company position area swiftly. Brigadier Paris, who was the officiating GOC for the 11th Indian Division at that time, instructed Major Alan Davidson Brown, who was stationed at around here. They can still communicate through the telegraph line that were in existence along this railway line, and Brigadier Paris instructed Major Alan Davidson Brown to retreat back behind the 52 Punjab positions. So because of that directive, which they were supposed to hold the area, because of that directive by Brigadier Paris, amid the confusion, because of the rain and pitch black conditions at that night, it starts the whole melee where the men of A Company managed to find the Punjab line, but the men of C Company were completely outflanked and annihilated by the Japanese 41st Infantry Regiment, where the infantry were following the 6th Tank Regiment frontal tank assault. And the men of B Company, which were stationed in the middle of between men of A Company and C Company, managed to find their battalion HQ at the D Company positions and return back to the 52 Punjab line. And soon enough, as early as 4:30 a.m. in the morning, CO for the 52 Punjab find the man of Ahir's battalion, or what we call it, 4th 19 Hyderabad, or the Hyderabadis, filtered through the position that was held by the 52 Punjab men, which I am about to bring all of you next. The 4th 19 Hyderabad defensive position was overrun very swiftly in the official engagement of the Battle of Slim River, just within an hour when the first contact was established at 3:30 a.m. with the enemy. This led to widespread panic among the Hyderabad men. Psychology was contagious more than the flu. The men of the A Company, realizing the Japanese had used tanks to carry out frontal assault down the parallel road at the area occupied by the C Company, soon find themselves isolated. Report soon went to Brigadier Paris at Tanjung Malim and the General Officer commanding the 11th Indian Division, who opined to keep a strong linear line of defense intact. He ordered Major Alan Davidson Brown, the officiating CO of the 4th 19th Hyderabad, to pull out his men to the southern sector defended by its sisters battalion in pitch black rainy night. The main flaw of the Battle of Slim River, set up originally by Paris, was that the Hyderabad unit was just supposed to be the tripwire unit, positioned furthest at the front line to trigger the whole British 11th Indian Division in executing the primary objective of the Malaya Command, which was not to defend or hold the area as long as possible, but only to inflict as many casualties and damages to the enemy, then retreat to the next southern position. The 11th Indian Division was originally supposed to hold the Trolak and Slim River sector for only one night before retreating to their next defensive position at Tanjung Malim at least by 8th of January 1942. This was an absurd plan concocted by Lieutenant General Percival, considering if they followed this retreat schedule to the south rather than put up a stand, like what they did at Kampar, sooner than later they wouldn't have any more land to retreat to. And that's what exactly happened on the 15th of February 1942. If the main plan by the Malaya Command, which was drawn before the outbreak of the war, was to hold the Japanese invasion as far north of Singapore as long as possible, also known as the Malay States Barrier Strategy, at least now to allow for the arrival of the 18th British Division safely at Singapore Harbour for a counter-attack, Percival should have held the Kampar position and reinforced the vulnerable Changkat Jung area with the 1st Malay Brigade or any other available British brigade at his disposal, instead of leaving the best defensive position for the whole Malayan campaign in haste. Moreover, the Kampar defensive position had proved that the Japanese tanks were ineffective against the British fixed defensive position along the main defilement route area. I know for a fact that the other British brigades, which at that time were dormant and being held back at Singapore Island, of which their commanding officers were itching to get some action, especially the Malay Brigade and the Australian Brigade. They were better trained at bush warfare. This was a lost opportunity and, in my opinion, was one of the biggest blunders made by Percival, considering most men and officers from the 1st Malay Brigade were from the state of Perak, which could give a large advantage for a longer holdout at the state of Perak, especially at Kampar and Changkat Jung. I also have visited both areas, be it at Kampar or Changkat Jung. They were an excellent defensive position that could be defended for a very long time if the Malaya Command choose to, taking into account the original plan by the Malaya Command, which was to uphold the Malay States Barrier Strategy. I can summarize that the only reason why Percival decided to abandon both areas was due to his weak and indecisive personality. At the height of the battle, Percival chose to take a break for a short holiday at Fraser Hill on the pretext of observing the 9th Indian Division retreat from Pahang, instead of focusing his energy on the main battlefront at Kampar or Changkat Jung. These were just a few of a commander's lack of judgment at the height of the battle, which eventually led to the loss of the British possession in the Far East. At this juncture, the only mistake made by the British government or the Whitehall London, which was a major factor contributing to the fall of Singapore, was to keep such a man as the general officer commanding Malaya, instead of replacing him with someone better, perhaps at the earliest after the fall of Gurun or Kota Baru. These weaknesses were very well observed by General Wavell and his ADC after the conclusion of the Battle of Slim River, while the new Abda commander visited Kuala Lumpur to investigate the reason for the Slim River defeat on the 8th of January 1942. General Wavell was pondering replacing him with General Pownall, but eventually he cancelled the decision on the pretext Pownall was just a junior staff officer compared to Percival. This decision, in my opinion, cost the British their Malaya possession after the British return in 1945. After receiving the directive from Brigadier Paris to leapfrog behind the Punjab defensive area, Major Alan Davidson Brown instructed 2nd Lieutenant Edmund Laughlin of the B Company to wait for the C Company's arrival to their position as planned before retreating together behind the 5th Punjab defensive area. The A Company should retreat immediately down the railway line, followed by the C Company towards the B Company's position in the thick jungle before both companies should use the road with all of their motor transport vehicles to retreat behind the Punjab position. However, this tactic was best only explained on paper and could not be carried out smoothly on pitch black rainy nights. The whole debacle resulted in the whole of C Company being wiped out by the Japanese army, which beforehand managed to clear the tank obstacles erected in the middle of the road at milestone 60 mark within an hour. Soon enough, Lieutenant Colonel Cecil Deakin, CO of the 5th Punjab, found the confused batches of panic-stricken Hyderabad men filtered through the 3rd marker area, which was a relatively strong defensive position with an elevated ridge on both sides of the road, occupied by the Punjab men. Major Alan Davidson Brown, 43 years old, however, did not survive the long night retreat to Slim River. During the 83rd anniversary of the Battle of Malaya, I visited the Commonwealth War Grave in Taipei. I noticed no Hyderabad graves were marked at the British Indian Army section. I would reckon the only explanation for it was that the remains of the Hyderabad men who perished during the Battle of Slim River, in particular at the Trolak sector, were left unattended where they have died. However, the grave of the Punjab men, in particular from the 5th Battalion 2nd Punjab Regiment, were marked on the tombstones laid there, although I believe many more of the perished Punjabi men were still unaccounted for. Before I end this episode, I would like to offer 3 hypotheses concerning the battles within the Trolak sector. One was the entry point for the Japanese infantry probing team to scour the area along the railway line, south of the railway bridge at the Sungkai River on the 5th of January 1942. I believe the location behind this old bus station of Sungkai was the entry point for the Japanese infantrymen to push through down the railway line until they were annihilated by the A Company of the Hyderabad, the same position where I have brought all of my viewers. I would reckon while waiting for the road bridge to be fixed, the Japanese tanks were lined up on this road beside these old shop houses. This was also the most probable area where Major Toyosaku Hajime Shimada persuaded Colonel Tadao Ando, the CEO of the 42nd Japanese Infantry Regiment, to carry out a frontal tank charge that night at the British position past the parallel bridge at Sungkai. There was a famous photo taken a night before the attack made by the 6th Tank Regiment on the late night of 6th of January 1942, which shows Major Toyosaku Shimada made a sake toast with his Type 97 tank crew. So my hunch would say that famous photo was taken around this area. So we now at the old road and was the main road back then connecting between the northern sector to the southern sector. The Sungkai Bridge located at around 1 kilometers from where I am standing. So again, while awaiting for the Japanese army engineers to repair the railway bridge and also the metal road bridge located at 1 kilometers distance from where I am standing now, the famous photo shows Major Toyosaku Hajime Shimada made the sake toast with his tank crew. It was the Type 97 tank because there were 4% of it. And I believe the toast were made after Major Toyosaku Hajime Shimada managed to persuade Colonel Tadao Ando, the CEO of the 42nd Infantry Regiment, to make the attack that very night using a tank as the frontal assault. So it was never been done before. The effort made by Major Toyosaku Hajime Shimada to persuade Colonel Tadao Ando to agree and to adhere with his suggestion to make the frontal tank assault in front of the infantry was a very unconventional method. And they were making the toast to celebrate Major Toyosaku Hajime Shimada's success in persuading Colonel Tadao Ando. And little did they know, the attack that they made that very night from this position here to the Slim River Bridge located at around 40 kilometers from where I am standing is deemed to be in the armor textbook which used the tank as the frontal tank assault. So my hunch would say that famous photo was taken at around here under the moonlight or perhaps under the street light of the Sungkai Old Town in 1942. The second hypothesis that I would like to offer was the area where the 6th Tank Regiment, commanded by Major Toyosaku Hajime Shimada, gathered on the night of January 6, 1942 after they crossed the road bridge of the Sungkai River. I first came to this area with some sort of a deja vu feeling and a strong hunch that this was the position where the Tamil coolies saw the hundreds of iron land ships which had amassed the day before the attack. This was an old road that had been straightened out post-independence period. It was a rubber plantation area before being converted into a palm oil orchard. The third hypothesis that I would like to offer was the fallout position for the Japanese probing party that was ambushed by the Hyderabad men on the evening of the 5th of January 1942. I stumbled upon this old train station at Klah, or more accurately, the station was known as Klah Halt, which appeared on the Malayan map as early as 1932 while scouring the Trollak area to find ways to the ambush site, which killed 156 enemy personnel on the evening of 5th of January 1942. According to my friend Benny Tan, this halt served the locals around Klah as a train transportation hub connecting Klah to the other Malayan cities since 1932. I would presume back then, there were small Malay dwellings around this halt area where the locals would wait to board the train since the road transportation was not as popular as today. Railways were the primary land transportation for the Malayans before the common use of automobiles, which were later introduced by the British colonial government and became popular in the 1930s. According to my friend Benny, this signboard in front of me actually belonged to the Enggu station. But it was brought here in the 1960s once the Malayan Railway closed the Enggu station and upgraded the Klah Halt as the proper train station. I am now standing at the old Kelah railway station, or once known as the Kelah Halt. So according to my good friend Benny Tan, this station first appeared in the Malayan map in 1932. So it was originally a halt, but then perhaps has been upgraded into a proper railway station, and then downgrade again in 1960s and 70s to a halt. So we are at around 2 or 3 kilometer distance from the first Hyderabadis A company positions, and this is a very interesting finding when I studied the Battle of the Slim River. So straight in front of me at around 2 or 3 kilometer distance were the positions of the A company, the Hyderabadis, and to the north of me, at 4 miles distance, lies the parallel bridge of the railway bridge and the metal road bridge, where it was destroyed by the Royal Engineers on the 4th of January 1942, and then repaired quickly by the Japanese Army Engineers to allow the 42nd Ando Infantry Regiment to make the frontal tank charge and also the attack at 2 axis line, which was the metal road and also the railway line. So we are at around 500 meters distance from the metal road, and the railroad ran parallel with the metal road. So my hypothesis would say, after the ambush made by the A company of the Hyderabadis along this railway line at around 2 or 3 kilometer distance at milestone 60, which killed 156 Japanese army personnel, the survivors of the Japanese Probing Party or the Advanced Echelon Team, it was written that they have retreated further north back towards the railway bridge at Sungkai. But then if you took into considerations the existence of this railway halt station known as Kelah, and then the probing made by the Japanese advance team, most probably being supported or assisted by the locals, the Malay youth movement. I believe some of the survivors that were ambushed on the 5th of January 1942 evening, they returned back here, and some of them went up to the northern bridge, the parallel bridge of this railway transportation, and also the metal road at Sungkai at a distance of 4 miles. So this is a very interesting findings because I would somehow foresee in 1942 there was a small Malay traditional village at around Kelah area. So this station would support the Malay dwellings in 1942. There were no Chinese population reside around here except at Bido, because there was a large tin mine areas at Bido. But there was an existence of the Kelah Halt in 1942. So the survivors of the January 5th ambush most probably retreated here to lick their wounds, and some of them went up further north to the railway bridge and also the metal road bridge that runs parallel in Sungkai. So Nowadays, as I have already mentioned many times, that after Malaysian government upgraded the railway line to double railway track and electrified, the Kelah halt station ceased to exist because there is not any more demands for the Malayan Railway to support the transportation needs of the residents around here. But again, if you can try to imagine what happened on the 5th of January after the successful ambush made by the A Company of the Hyderabadis, the survivors of the Japanese advance team retreated here, and some of them were probably encamped around this area, and some of them also retreated further north towards the HQ of the 42nd Japanese Infantry Regiment. So even though it may not seem much, but for a researcher like me, for a history freak, to find this railway station that were in the British colonial government map and supported by facts checked by my good friend Benny, it was very interesting enough, even for me myself. So it's one of the hypotheses that I would like to offer. The connections between this Kelah halt station with the Battle of Slim River, especially the one that occurred on the 5th of January 1942. Since the local eyewitness most probably have all died of old age, until we found new shreds of evidence with regards to the preparation of an attack at the Tolak sector by the 42nd Ando Infantry Regiment, this remains an exciting fact to be discovered, in particular for all of the hypotheses that I have mentioned to be proven. In the next episode, we will return to marker site number 3, where I will do my very best to depict the admirable attitude and bravery of the Punjab men trying to stop the frontal tank charge of Major Toyosaku Shimada Tank's column to Slim River. I will see you all in the next episode. Thank you for your support and viewing.